So Joe Biden continues to maintain his lead in the Democratic primary field. According to the latest Quinnipiac poll, 30% of Democratic voters said they support the former VP, putting him 11 points ahead of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. However, Biden's down a few points since last month. 19% of Democrats say they back Sanders. He's up 3 points from last month. And 15% back Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's up 2 points. 8% support Mayor Pete. He's up 3. 7% said they support Senator Kamala Harris, and 3% support former Congressman and, of course, Texas Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke. Beto will be with us later on this morning. Willie, you look at the poll, and so many of these polls seem to be breaking in one direction, and that is you got your top tier, and your top tier is Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. And it really is starting to shape up. Again, maybe it's pole position. I don't know exactly how early this will prove to be to mean anything. But, boy, you see Joe Biden taking the lion's share. But then you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, with Elizabeth Warren doing what we all thought she would do at the beginning, and that is cut into Bernie Sanders' massive support in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and it was probably inevitable that Vice President Biden would dip down a little bit from his astronomical numbers before he got into the race and then the early days and weeks of this campaign. Bernie Sanders has kind of been holding steady, but you're right, Elizabeth Warren is the one who's come up to that top tier. Mayor Pete's just somewhere ticks below there. Steve Kornacki, we were talking before we came on the air about Joe Biden sort of coming from that 40% space down to that 30% space. What strikes you as you look at that latest poll?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that strikes me, too, is when you take a step back and you realize there are 24 people right now seeking the Democratic presidential nomination, and really you've just got a handful who are registering at all in the polls right now. I think one of the things we've seen the first 6 months of this year is there's been such a logjam. There have been so many candidates. It's actually been very difficult for anybody to break through outside of that top group. Buttigieg got in there. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. Outside of that, nobody's registering that much. There's an opportunity, obviously, coming up for them. But when you look at Joe Biden, look, I think it's sort of in a holding pattern right now. It's a question of what does Joe Biden look like? What does he sound like? What message does he have? What response does he have for his opponents when he gets on that debate stage in a couple weeks? I think that's sort of the test. And then as soon as that debate ends, as soon as he's off the stage, he accelerates. I think we're expecting his campaign schedule some. So then what does he look like when you're getting more of a permanent, almost day-to-day campaign from Joe Biden? I was struck yesterday just watching from afar these events he did at Iowa. It started out, you saw him at the podium reading from his text, looking down at prepared remarks, looking down at his notes, and very subdued. Seemed like in some ways, not a very zestful performance. Then I looked up an hour later. He walked away from the podium at the next event. He's looking into the crowd. He's walking, sort of pacing the room right there. And I said, that's the Joe Biden I remember from past campaigns. That's the Joe Biden I think, who could tap into that very, vast goodwill that exists for him among Democratic voters.
Maybe so, and that does seem to me, at least, to be a pretty good formula for Joe Biden, actually reading notes at the lectern, staying on script at the lectern, and then when he goes out, shakes hands with people, connects in a positive way. That's pretty powerful, and it's probably his best path forward. But Mike Barnicle, a lot of people will love to dismiss polls that are coming out in the summer of 2019 saying, oh, it's not going to have any big impact. Boy, but let me tell you something. When the next FEC filings are dropped, then you will know it makes a difference. If you're sitting at 1%, if you're sitting at 2%, good luck getting the $35, $40, $45 million you need to survive till Iowa. You just won't do it. Pretty soon we're going to see that these polls actually do matter.
Yeah, they do, Joe, and it's really striking what Steve pointed out. because I think a lot of people noticed that Joe's initial presentation yesterday, reading off the notes, and then an hour and a half later, out in the crowd, speaking extemporaneously, it was almost as if there were two different Joe Bidens, and the one Joe Biden later in the day is the one you recognize. But back to raising money and the importance of polls now. In speaking to a lot of Democrats over the past few days, a lot of people are struck by a couple of things. Elizabeth Warren's rise in the polls and her intensity in terms of issuing, I've got a plan. It has really taken hold, and I think has hurt Bernie Sanders, as we've indicated over the past few weeks. But the other question that's raised that I hear repeatedly, and Steve, I don't know whether you hear this, is what has happened to Kamala Harris? I mean, she came out of the gate like wildfire and seems to have stalled and is frozen at 7% and can't move from there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The Harris strategy, too, there was some news in the last week or so that the campaign is getting ready to and is now investing in Iowa aggressively. And I think the idea is they're going to try to move the numbers in Iowa, in the leadoff caucus state. And there's that theory with Harris that's always been there, that it's sort of like the Obama path back in 2008, that there's a slingshot effect from Iowa, from exceeding expectations in Iowa, that could change everything in South Carolina overnight. That's what happened with Obama 12 years ago. That has existed in theory for Kamala Harris. But you're right. I think, look, Elizabeth Warren lately has been getting a lot more attention. Before that, it was Pete Buttigieg. In between, you had the Joe Biden launch. And she's really kind of been squeezed out lately.
But on the question of electability, Kamala Harris, like many of these Democrats, is doing very well in a head-to-head matchup with President Trump. That new Q poll shows President Trump lagging far behind Joe Biden and 5 other top Democrats in a general election matchup. Quinnipiac University poll taken between Thursday and Monday shows Trump trailing Joe Biden by 13 points, 53 to 40. Bernie Sanders beats Trump by 9 points in the poll, 51 to 42. Kamala Harris ahead by 8 points. Elizabeth Warren by 7 points. Pete Buttigieg and Cory Booker each lead the president by 5 points, with President Trump failing to break 42% against any single one of them. These general election results fit a pattern of people who view Trump favorably in the poll, as 42% approve of the president's job performance, 41% credit President Trump for a good economy, and only 41% approve of the president's policy toward Mexico, which he, of course, is touting as a big victory. So, Joe, if we go back to those head-to-head matchups, it's stunning to me, and it has been in all these head-to-heads over the last several weeks, that Donald Trump is no different against Joe Biden than he is against Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or Mayor Pete or any of these candidates. He is a 40%, 41% president.
Well, he is. And, leading up to the midterms, when Democrats were so concerned, everybody was so concerned, it was important to remember that despite all the sound and the fury, despite all the tweets, despite the daily controversies, you had to focus on the fact that Donald Trump was a 40% president. That meant 6 in 10 Americans did not agree with Donald Trump and what he was doing in his presidency. That, of course, what did that lead to in the midterms? It led to the biggest vote total rout in the history of the United States of America for Democrats against Republicans. And Susan Page, you look at the president here, and he's sitting at 40, 41, 42%. You can go back. You can see everything that he has done. You can see everything that he has said since January 20th, 2017, when he did his American Carnage speech. And you can see that all of his words and all of his deeds and all of his actions have been focused on one thing: solidifying his base. Well, congratulations, Mr. President. You've got 40%. And that's all you've got, right?
It's in some ways a sign of the president's strength that he has had 40% support regardless of what he's done. Those are people who have been with him from the start and are likely to be with him forever. And the question is that the ceiling? Is 40 or 42% the ceiling for President Trump? Because if your ceiling is 42%, the only way you win the presidency is in a 3-way race. Not impossible to have a 3-way race, but if we have a 2-way race, you're not going to win with 42%. And if you look at the stability of President Trump's level of support, look at where Joe Biden's advantage comes in this Quinnipiac poll. It's interesting. Trump and Biden are tied among white voters. They are tied among male voters. Those are the groups that delivered the presidency to Donald Trump last time around. And the reason that I think the White House is so focused on Biden is because of how competitive Joe Biden is with those particular voter groups.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember, Mika, is that polls don't always reflect the breadth of Donald Trump's support. We noticed in 2016 we could be talking to 1,000 people and nobody would admit that they were voting for Donald Trump, and then you would actually talk to them afterwards and they would all come up saying they were voting for Donald Trump. This is a little different. He's now running as an incumbent politician who hasn't kept his word on Mexico paying for the wall or on health care for all, universal health care, an improved health care, a cheaper health care, or tax cuts for working class Americans. So there's all of that. But at the same time, when it is Donald Trump on stage against one Democrat, it is going to tighten up.
Yeah.
But for now, he starts as a 40% president.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.